You know, it's almost like your birthday with a package from China, so let's go. But okay, so it's quite confusing, but basically what they're using is an Android box, or they like rebranding an Android box. So it says here Android television, and that is what we will find inside. But first of all, the first thing that we're going to see, by the way, is like this game box 4K. And I must say that it looks quite interesting. I'm curious if there's a fan in here. Will this light up? And what are we going to get? And in here we're going to get ourselves an extra sticker that says like how to work with the Android mode. Android mode is basically removing the SD card and switching systems, well, power off. Very important. Alright guys, so let's take a close look at the Android part. So let's unbox my remote. If I know how to unbox it, here it is. And let's use this bad boy. It will use two AAA batteries that we'll grab later on. It's a cheap remote, like cheap to the cheap, nothing really special. The thing that we need to do is very simple, is remove the CF card I already did over here. And then we're going to boot it up like always. There's no on and off switch on this freaking thing, so just plug in your power and let's go. Let's see what we're going to get with the Android. So when booting it up, this is what you're going to get. It's a super simplistic menu. I have personally never seen it like this, but what you can do is like basically go to the Play Store, use Google, stuff like that. Then we're going to get, of course, the option to play some games if you want to. But the most interesting part is when you're going to the applications over here. So we can do a lot of tinkering, and we also install an APK installer. So basically what we can do with that is installing new games if you don't want to use the Play Store. But of course the Play Store gives you way more possibilities when it comes to playing some games. And if you want to, you can basically install your own programs or emulators and mess around with it and just start tinkering if you really are into stuff like that. But okay, so let's take a close look at the specifications list. And the specs are okay. They are promising. They are not like the more of the high-end stuff that I've seen before. It's still a very cheap old box, 2 GB of RAM, comes with a basic AM logic chip inside. Here you can see like it runs basically with an ARM Cortex A53 that runs on even 1200 MHz. That's even not the fastest clock speed I've seen out there, and in combination with the GPU that is a Mali 450 MB. Another thing I find interesting that it is a rooted device. That's not interesting, but it runs on Android 9. Take consideration if you want to play some Netflix, that is not possible, or a low resolution. But let's take a close look at the games and how will they run on this box, because the performance wise of an old box, don't get like excited, think you can play the latest Android games. You're still limited when it comes to some of the games. But the library of Android, even for an old Android box, is still big, so you can play a lot of awesome shmups or other adventure games with the controller. So yeah, actually like it is an Android box turned into a game box, but still they left the dual boot in, so what you can do is play yourself some Android games. I think it's a really cool addition if you just love these Android games. If it's a shmup or a racing game, the games will run just fine on this. But like the latest Asphalt, they were going to get some troubles, because that game is quite demanding for the CPU GPU. But the games I tried were mostly like older games, basic games, and they run all just fine on this. So in combination with basically the dual boot they are using, I think it's a pretty damn awesome machine. And what they mean with the 4K game box, especially I think they're using the 4K or abusing the name, because it's not putting out 4K signal, it's most of the time lower, but more like you can use this box on a 4K television. Okay, so when I did the unboxing, I completely forgot to check what kind of power supply they were giving me. And I wanted to connect it, realizing it doesn't work. Guess what? They gave me a 5-volt power supply. So I'm going to connect in 12 volt because the bag already says here 12 volt. So is that what we're going to connect? This thing is more powerful than we're going to need. So let's boot it up and let's see what we're going to get. But okay guys, so let's see what we're going to get with this device. The menu looks very nice. We don't have any previous videos, but we do have like a tiny picture. But overall, like the performance of this we're going to test out. So we're going to get PlayStation Portable, Sega Naomi, N64, PlayStation, Arcade, Super NES, Game Boy Advance, Mega Drive, NES, Game Boy Color, Neo Geo Pocket. That is something you don't see very often. Let's see, the Sega Game Gear, Famicom. The 32X seems to be on this, some Atari, and yeah, it's of course the one big gigantic list. But overall quite interesting features. Setup has been not be found here, like there's no button whatsoever on the back. and going straight into the favorites. So there's a little bit of a bummer. So that's it. So what you see is basically what you're going to get. But let's take a close look at the search engine, because there is something I really like. So I was searching for Mortal Kombat. You can see like it works very fast. So you can see like basically when you're looking up a game, it will like search very fast when you're typing. Something you don't see with every single system. Another thing I do like is that it will give you like the option like what game you want to play and which platform it is. That is also like an issue I have found with some of these boxes. But it's pretty damn interesting. But over here we're going to get the option for search. And of course we're having select and back. And when you're pressing the X you can mark a game like favorites that we can find back in the... Yeah, that we basically can find back into the favorite list. Select L2 we will save, and select R2 we will have a quick load, and with start plus double click select, or better said like start select twice, we go back to the main menu. Okay, so let's try Sega Nomi to begin with. I already noticed some glitching in the beginning of this game. So when it comes to low power devices, you will see some issues. If it's not FPS drops, it also will be like glitches, but most part of the game runs just fine. Alright, so next up N64, and N64 on a low power device like this is always the same issues. Some games will run just fine with some minor glitching, but for example, Screws in the World, I did notice some logo issues here and there when starting up the game, but then overall we're going to get a quite good performance. So again, it's a mixed bag when it comes to N64 like always. If you want to play these games, yeah, one of the things you can do is like get yourself like a beefy mini PC, and that most of the time will run these devices just fine. But again, it's a budget product with low specs, so this is the best what you're gonna get. Okay, so next up let's play some PlayStation 1, and of course we're going to do the benchmark game Bloody Roar 2. And the reason why is because if this game runs good, most of the games will run just fine. Take consideration, so if you want to play some PlayStation 1 on higher resolutions, you need to have more power, so this thing will run it on just fine native resolution. Alright, so next up PlayStation Portable. I always find it quite interesting to see how they will run on a cheap box like this. And you will see some hiccups here and there, but overall performance is quite good. But yeah, and God of War, the really demanding games will not run on this. Another thing is a little bit of a bummer. So with some Pandora's boxes we have this tweak that we can play with 2 players with PlayStation Portable, but that is not possible with an Android box or a Game Box 4K in this case. So that means you can only play 1-player games. A little bit of a bummer, but that's the things we need to live with stuff like this. Alright, so let's try a MAME game. Of course we're going to do Mortal Kombat 1 for the benchmark, because this is a super demanding game. And I was surprised to see that it also runs very well on this system. Ah, that was the move I was searching for. Alright, so what do I think of the Game 4K box or the Game Box 4K? And overall, like, I do like the design itself, and what it can do is quite interesting. But there are some flaws. For example, that we don't have the option to tinker with the settings, the emulator, stuff like that. So if you love tinkering, that is something you just need to avoid. This is more like a plug and play solution. Slap on your files and you're ready to go. But when you're looking at the Android version, I think like the Android version 9 that is on this machine, in combination like with, that was the interesting thing, like the dual boot. And you can even use this thing like an Android box. Take consideration as a rooted device with Netflix will not run on high resolutions. But beside that point, I think it's a quite interesting piece of technology and concept. It's old tech, but you're not paying a lot of money for it, but you're still going to get a lot of value. I want to thank you for watching. Consider subscribing, hit that little bell to become the bigger family, and we'll see you in the next video.